Hello, Brav. We're back with Tried for Her Life by Mrs. E.D.E.N. Southworth. Hopefully this isn't a long chapter, because I don't feel like reading. But we shall do it anyway, just because we're gamers, troopers. Chapter 10. The night attack on the coach. The sound of hoof, the flash of steel, the robbers round her coming. The road robbers, by all that's devilish, grasped Jones, falling back in his seat. Good gracious, cried Smith, and all the brave bum Baileys who had so gallantly bullied and browbeaten Sybil and her sole defender, dropped panic-stricken, paralyzed by terror. Get out of this, you vermin, ordered a stern voice at one of the windows. Yes, gentlemen, faltered Jones. Take all we have, but spare our lives, pleaded Smith. Well, get out of this, you miserable cowards. Empty your pockets, and you shall be safe. It would be crueler than infanticide to slay such miserably helpless wretches, laughed the same voice, which poor Sybil, as in a dream, recognized as belonging to Captain Incanu. The trembling bailiffs descended from the coach and gave up their pocketbooks and watches, and then submitted to be tied to trees. The coachman and the guard yielded to the same necessity. The horses were taken from the coach and appropriated to the use of the victors. And lastly, Sybil, who was rendered by despair indifferent to her fate, was lifted from her seat by the strong arms of Moloch, who held her a moment in suspense while he turned to his chieftain and inquired, "Where now, Captain?" "To the rendezvous, and look that you treat the lady with due deference." "Never you fear, Captain. I'm sober tonight," answered the giant, as he threw the half-fainting form of the lady across his shoulders and strode up a narrow footpath leading through the mountain pass. Indifferent to fate, to life, to all things, Sybil felt herself borne along in the firm embrace of her rude abductor. As in a dream, she heard his voice speaking to her. "Now don't you be afeard, darlint. We ain't none on us agwine to hurt a hair of your head, or to let anybody else do it. Bless your purty face. If we didn't carry you off, you'd spend this night and many more on 'em in the county jail, and end by losing your liberty and your life for that which you never did. But you's safe now, and don't you go to mistrusting on us upon account of that night. Why, Lord love you, we was all drunk as dukes that night, else we would never molested you. Otherwise we will never molest you, my lady. Lord, if you'd seen the lots of liquor we took aboard, you wouldn't wonder at nothing. But we're sober now, and so you's safe. Where's your little dog? Lord bless my life and soul, how that little creature did take hold of my throat, to be sure. Where is she?" Sybil could not answer. Indeed, though she heard the voice, she scarcely comprehended the question. "What? You won't speak to me, eh? Well, that's natural, too, but precious hard, seeing as I risked my life to save your'n, and mean you so well into the bargain," continued the ruffian, as he strode onward to a place where several horses were tied. He selected the strongest of the group, mounted, and lifted the helpless form of the lady into a seat before him, and set off at full speed, clattering through the rugged mountain pass with a recklessness of life and limb that at another time would have frightened his companion half out of her senses. But now, in her despair of life, there was even a hope in this mad career, the hope of a sudden death. But the gigantic ruffian knew himself, his horse, and his road, and so he carried his victim through that fearful pass in perfect safety. They reached a deep, narrow, secluded valley, in the midst of which stood an old red sandstone house, closely surrounded by trees and only dimly to be seen in the clouded night sky. Here the robber rider slackened his pace. The deep silence that prevailed, the thick growth of leafless weeds and briars through which their horse had to wade, all showed that this house had been long uninhabited and the grounds long uncultivated. Yet there was someone on guard, for when Moloch rode up to the door and dismounted, and holding Sybil tightly clasped in his left arm, Rapped 3 times 3 with his right hand. The door was cautiously opened by a decrepit old man who held a lighted taper in his withered fingers. "Oh, Pluto, who is here?" inquired Moloch, striding into the hall and bearing Sybil in his arms. "No one, sir, but the girls and the woman. And they have just come," answered the old man. "No one but the girls and the woman, and they have just come, and no fire made, and no supper ready, and this hell of an old house colder and damper than the cavern. Won't the captain be leaping mad, that's all. Come, bestir yourself, and make a fire first of all. This lady is as cold as death. Where is Iska?" "In this room, sir," answered the old man, pushing open an old, worm-eaten door that admitted them into a large, old-fashioned, oak-paneled parlor, with a wide fireplace and a high corner cupboard, but without other furniture. On the hearth knelt Gentiliska, trying to coax a little smoldering fire of green wood into a blaze. "What the devil is the use of puffing away at that? You'd just as well try to set fire to a wet sponge," impatiently exclaimed Moloch. He went to one of the windows, wrenched off a dry, mouldering shutter, broke it to pieces with his bare hand, and piled it in among the green logs. Then from his pocket he took a flask of whiskey, poured a portion of it on the weak red embers, and in an instant had the whole mass of fuel in a roaring blaze. Meanwhile Sybil, unable to stand, had sunk down upon the floor, where she remained only until Gentiliska saw her by the blaze of the fire. You are as cold as ice," said the kind-hearted girl, taking Sybil's hand in her own and trying to warm them. "Come to the fire," she continued, assisting the lady to rise and drawing her towards the chimney. "Sit here," she added, arranging her own red cloak as a seat. "Thanks," murmured Sybil. "Thanks. You are very good to me. Moloch, she is nearly dead. Have you got any wine? If you have, give it to me," was the next request of the girl. The giant lumbered off to a heap of miscellaneous luggage that lay in one corner, and from it he rooted out a black bottle which he brought and put in the hands of the girl, saying, "There, ha ha ha, there's some of her own old port. We made a raid upon Blackhall Buttery last night, on purpose to provide for her." "All right. Now a tin saucepan and some sugar and spice, old Moloch, and also, if possible, a cup or a tumbler," said Gentiliska. The giant went back to the pile in the corner, and after a little search brought forth all the articles required by the girl. "Now, good Moloch, go and do for old Hecate what you have done for me. Make her a fire, that she may have supper ready for the captain when he comes," coaxed Gentiliska. "Just so, princess," agreed the robber, who immediately confiscated another shutter and carried it off into the adjoining back room to kindle the kitchen fire. "You were wrong to leave us. You got into trouble immediately. You would have been in a worse, I'm guessing, bind by this time if we had not rescued you. Don't you know when the laws are down on you, your only safety is with the outlaws?" inquired Gentiliska, as soon as she found herself alone with her guest. "I don't know. I don't care. It is all one to me now. I only wish to die. If it were not a sin, I would die by suicide," answered Sybil with the dreary calmness of despair. "Die by suicide? Die by a fiddlestick's end? You to talk so, and you not 20 years old yet? Bosh. Wait, she's only 20? Cut the law that persecutes you and come with us, merry outlaws who protect you, and whatever you do, don't run away from us again. You got us into awful trouble and danger and loss when you ran away with the last time. Did you know it?" "No," sighed Sybil wearily. "Well, then, you did, and I'll tell you how it all happened. The secret of your abode at Pendleton Park was known to too many people. It couldn't possibly be kept forever by all. It is a wonder that it was kept so long by any. They kept it only until they thought you were safe from pursuit and arrest. Then some of Captain Pendleton's people, it is not known whom, let it leak out until it got to the ears of the authorities, who set inquiries on foot. And then the whole thing was discovered and, as usual, misinterpreted and misrepresented. You got the credit of voluntarily consorting with us and of purposely blowing up the old haunted chapel, and the new warrants that were issued for your arrest charged you with that crime also. Good heaven, exclaimed Sybil, forgetting all her indifference. What will they not heap upon my head next? I will not rest under that imputation. I will not. Neither would I if I were you. That is, if I could help it, said the girl sarcastically. But Sybil sat with her thin hands clasped tightly together, her deathly white face rigid as marble, and her large, dilated eyes staring into the fire, heedless of the strange girl's irony. But now I must tell you how all this hurt us. In the first place, when your flight from the cavern was discovered, we felt sorry only on your account because you ran into imminent danger of arrest. We had no idea then that your arrest would lead to the discovery of our retreat. But it did. When our detectives brought in the news of the warrants that were out against you, they also warned us that the authorities had the clue to our caverns and that there was no time to be lost in making our escape. With their hands still closely clasped together, with their pallid features still set as in death, and with their staring eyes still fixed upon the fire, Sybil sat heedless of all that she heard. And we got a train going on and a weed whacker next door. The girl continued her story. We let no time be lost. We gathered up the most valuable and portable of our effects, and that same night evacuated our cavern and dispersed our band, taking care to appoint a distant place of rendezvous. Satan watched the road, riding frequently to the wayside inns to try to discover the coach by which you would be brought back. He was at Upton this evening when the stage stopped to change horses. He recognized you and immediately mounted, put spurs to his fast horse, and rode as for life and death to the rendezvous of his band, and got them into their saddles to intercept the stagecoach. He also gave orders that we should come on to this deserted house, which he had discovered in the course of his rides, and which he supposes will be a safe retreat for the present. That is all I have to tell you, and I reckon you know all the rest, concluded Genaliska. But still Sybil sat in the same attitude of deep despair, regardless of all that was said to her. While Gentiliska's tongue was running, her hands were also busy. She prepared a cordial of spiced and sweetened port wine, and had set it in a saucepan over the fire to heat. And now she poured it out into a silver mug and handed it to Sybil, saying, "Come, drink. This will warm and strengthen you. You look like death, but you must not die yet. You must drink and live." "Yes, I must live," said Sybil. "I must live to throw off this horrible imputation for the fame of my father's daughter." And she took the goblet and drank the cordial. And soon a new expression passed into her face. The fixed despair rose into a settled determination, a firm, active resolution. "You look as if you were going to do something. What is it?" inquired Genaliska. "I'm going to give myself up. I am guiltless, and I will now not longer act the part of a guilty person," said Sybil firmly. "Your misfortunes have turned your head. You are as mad as a March hare," exclaimed Genaliska in consternation. "No, I'm not mad. On the contrary, it seems to me that I have been mad, or I never could have borne the fugitive life that I have been leading for the last 2 months. I will bear it no longer. I will give myself up to trial. Come what will of it. I would even rather die a guiltless death than lead an outlaw's life. I will give myself up." "After all the pains we have taken and risks we have run to rescue you," exclaimed Genaliska in dismay. "Yes, after all that. And yet I thank you all the same. I thank you all that you have set me at liberty, and by so doing have given me the opportunity of voluntarily delivering myself up, just as if Captain Incanu would let you do it. I tell you, he has his own reasons for saving your life," angrily retorted the girl. "And I have my reasons for risking my life upon the bare chance of rescuing my good name," said Sybil firmly. "And your captain would scarcely detain me here as a captive against my will," she added, smiling strangely. "Well, maybe he would, and maybe he wouldn't. But here he comes, and you can ask him," said the girl, as the galloping of a horse's feet was heard in the front yard. A moment passed, and then the robber chief, with 3 or 4 of his men, entered the room, bringing with them the mailbags and other booty taken from the stagecoach. "Good evening, Mrs. Berners. You are welcome back among your devoted slaves," was the greeting of Captain Incanu, as half in defense, half in mockery, he raised his cap and bowed low before the lady. For an instant, Sybil was dumb before the speaker, but she soon recovered her self-possession and said, "I ought to thank you for your gallantry in rescuing me from the custody of those rude men, especially as the freedom you have given me affords me the opportunity of voluntarily doing that which I should not like to be forced into doing." Captain Incanu bowed in silence and in some perplexity. Then he said, "I am not sure that I understand you, madam, as to what you would do." "I would go freely before a court of justice, instead of being forced thither," exclaimed Sybil. "I trust you would never commit such a suicidal act," exclaimed the captain in consternation. "Yes, I would, and I will. I care nothing for my life. I have lost all that makes life worth the living. All is gone but my true honor. For its mere semblance has gone with everything else. I would preserve that true honor. I would place myself on trial and trust in my innocence and in the help of Providence," said Sybil, speaking with a stoical firmness wonderful to see in one so young. Captain Incanu, who had listened in silence with his eyes fixed upon the ground, now lifted them to her face and replied, "Sleep on this resolution before you act, Mrs. Berners, and tomorrow we will talk further on this subject." "I must of necessity sleep on it before acting," said Sybil, with a dreary smile, "since nothing can be done tonight. But also, I must tell you that nothing can change my resolution." "Thus let it stand over until tomorrow," replied the captain. Then, with a total change of tone and manner, he turned to Gentiliska and said, "Now let us have supper, my little princess, and afterwards we will open the mail bags and see what they have brought us." Gentiliska clapped her hands together to summon the old woman of the band, who quickly made her appearance at the door. "Supper immediately, Hecate," said the girl. The woman nodded and withdrew, and in a few moments she reappeared and summoned them in to the evening meal. The supper was served in the rudest possible fashion. There was neither table nor chairs. A fine tablecloth, not too clean, was spread upon the floor, and on it were arranged a few plain articles of food, such as could be quickly prepared. "You will excuse our imperfect housekeeping, I hope, Mrs. Berners. The fact is, we have just moved in, and have not got quite comfortably settled yet," laughed the captain as he folded his own cloak as a seat for Sybil and led her up and placed her on it, and sat himself down by her side. Other members of the band joined them at the meal, and Captain Incanu and Gentiliska did the honors. Fortunately, there was nothing stronger than wine set before the men, and not much of that. And upon those who had been accustomed to strong brandy, and a great deal of it, this lighter beverage had but little effect. So to Sybil's great relief, she perceived that they continued sober to the end of their repast. "Come in now and let us take a look at the contents of the mailbags. That may afford some amusement to our lady guests," said Captain Incanu, when they all rose from the supper. They passed into the front parlor, where the robber chief with his own hands opened the mailbags, and turning them upside down, emptied all their contents in a heap in the middle of the floor. The robbers came and sat down around the pile and began to seize and tear open the letters. "Hello there, my man. When you open a letter with money in it, hand over the money to Gentiliska. She will gather and keep it all until we have gone entirely through this pile, and then we will divide it equitably, if not equally, among you," commanded the captain as he himself took a seat in the circle and began to assist in distributing the mail. He also set the example of scrupulously handing over the money he found in the letters he opened to the keeping of Gentiliska, who collected it all in a little pile on her lap. Some of the letters he read aloud to the company for their amusement, such, for instance, as sentimental letters from city swains to their country sweethearts, begging letters from boys at college to their parents, and guardians on the plantations, and dunning letter from metropolitan merchants to their provincial customers. Of these last mentioned, the captain said, "Look sharp, boys. Here are the New Year's bills coming down. They won't be answered by return mail this time, but they will be sent down again, after which remittances will begin to go up. We must keep a bright lookout for the up coaches about New Year's time, and we shall bag some neat thousands. We are not all bagged ourselves before that," growled Moloch. "Oh, Raven, hush your croaking. If we should listen to it long, we would never venture upon an enterprise of spirit." "Halloa, what's this? Something that concerns you, Mrs. Berners," exclaimed the captain, breaking off his discourse with his band and turning to Sybil, who was sitting quietly apart, and he held in his hand an open letter from which he had taken a bright ribbon. "Something that concerns me?" echoed poor Sybil, as a wild, irrational hope that the letter might contain news of her husband flashed across the dark despair of her soul. "Yes," answered the captain. "This letter is from Mrs. Beatrix Pendleton to her brother. It acknowledges the safe receipt of her valuable Indian shawl and sends love and thanks to you for recovering it from us and dispatching it to her. Moreover, she sends kind remembrances and this gay ribbon to some old nurse of the name of Margie. Here is the letter. Would you like to read it?" he laughingly inquired, as he offered it to Sybil. "No," she answered in strongly marked disapprobation. "That letter is a private one, not intended for my perusal, not for yours." "No? And yet you see I read it. Here, gently. Here it is. Here is a bit of bright ribbon to bind up your bonny black hair," laughed the captain, tossing the gay remnant to the girl, who caught it up and immediately twisted it coquettishly among her ebon locks. It occupied the band for nearly an hour to open and examine all the letters. When they had done so and had taken everything that was valuable out of them, they gathered the whole refuse mass of papers together and ruthlessly committed them to the flames. Then they divided the money among themselves, the captain and his men having each an equal, instead of a graduated share. "And now," said Captain Incarnu, "we will bid each other good night, and try to get some rest. Princess, take our guest upstairs to the large room immediately over this. She, you, and the other women will occupy that room tonight. Hecate has had my orders to that effect, and I hope you will find that she has made the place so comfortable as circumstances will permit." And so saying, he stuck a stump of a tallow candle in a souped-out turnip and handed it to gentle Isca and motioned her to conduct their guests from the room. Sybil very willingly left the company of the robbers and followed her hostess to the chamber above. It was a large, bare room, warmed and lighted by a fine wood fire, and furnished only with a few pallets made of their dried leaves, with blankets thrown over them. The old crone called Hecate, and the pale girl nicknamed Proserpine, stood basking before the blaze of the fire. Sybil felt pleased to know that she might sleep in peace that night, protected by the presence of other women. "This is the new lady's bed, this best one in the corner here by the fire," old Hecate explained, pointing to a pallet that, in addition to its dried leaves and warm blankets, was graced with clean sheets and pillowcases. Sybil thanked the old woman for her favor, and being very weary, took off her upper garments and lay down to rest, committing herself to the kind care of heaven, and soon sank into a deep sleep that lasted until morning. All right, bruv. That's all. Goodbye. Goodbye.